Hello and welcome to the Beach House 34 podcast. I'm your host, Christine Worth. We are continuing with the trial readings of the Darlie Routier case. Darlie is a mother who, in 1996, was accused and convicted of killing her two children in Rowlett, Texas, and who currently resides on death row. Today's episode is the continuing testimony of Detective Jimmy Patterson. He was the lead detective in the Darlie Routier case, and if you missed part one, it might help to listen to that one before this one, as things may make more sense because the two episodes kind of tend to build on one another. We're coming closer and closer to the final pieces of testimony in this case, and soon I'll be back to doing weekly true crime episodes. But for now, these trial readings take center stage. So let's continue with the testimony of Detective Patterson, and we are picking up where we left off in the last episode. He is still being questioned by one of Darlie's defense lawyers, Mr. Mulder, and we have now moved on from where he has left the hospital after visiting Darlie and is now headed back to the house on Eagle Drive where the crime occurred. All right. When you left the hospital, will you tell the jury where you went? That morning? Yes, sir. I went back to 5801 Eagle Drive. Okay. About what time did you get back there? I can't remember if it was shortly before 8 o'clock or shortly before 9 o'clock. Okay. When you got back there, who all was there? I can't tell you everyone that was there. I met up with Sergeant David Neighbors and James Cron. Was Neighbors in charge of coordinating things? The crime scene, yes, sir. That was his responsibility? Yes, sir. That would be a Sergeant Neighbors? Yes, sir. Okay, and he is one of the people that he has not testified in this case to your knowledge. Has he? No, sir, he has not. Okay, but it was his job to coordinate the crime scene? Yes, sir. And he would determine what was picked up and what wasn't and things of that nature? That would be part of his job. Yes, sir. Okay. As the chief investigator assigned to this offense, you would coordinate your investigation with Sergeant Neighbors, I suspect. Yes, sir. Did you walk through the scene? Yes, sir. Okay. And what was your purpose in doing that? James Cron and Neighbors took me through the scene just to show me what they were, what it looked like had happened in there. Okay. And what time was that? Well, if I got back at shortly before 8 o'clock, it was around 8 o'clock, or shortly before 9 o'clock, then it was around 9 o'clock. Okay. So you did it shortly after you arrived back at that area. Is that right? Yes, sir. Okay. And at that time, were they processing the scene? There had been, my understanding was that there had been photographs taken. Okay. Had it been processed for fingerprints? I don't know. Well, if you went through the scene, detective, you are probably an old hand at investigating murder cases, aren't you? What do you mean an old hand at it? Well, I mean, this wasn't your first one, was it? No, sir, it was not. How many had you investigated before? I have been on over 50 death investigation scenes. Okay. Well, that wasn't my question. I was talking about scenes. I have been on 5 or 6 or 7 scenes. You have been on some here lately, have you? I investigated one just prior to this one. Okay. How many have you done for Rowlett that I have actually investigated or personally been involved in is 5 or 6. Okay. Counting this? Yes, sir. Are you counting this as 1 or are you counting this as 3 or 2? I am just counting this as 1. Okay. So how long have you been a police officer? For 17 and a half years. Okay. So that would be one every what? 3 years approximately? No, sir. Okay. That I have actually been involved in? Well, you said 5 or 6. Well, that is only since I have been a detective. Okay. How long have you been a detective? 8 years. Okay. So that is one every year and a half? Approximately. Yeah. Okay. You have been through enough of them where you can tell if something has been dusted for fingerprints, can't you? Yes, sir. And how do you tell? By the powder. Okay. Had this crime scene been dusted for fingerprints? I didn't look. Well, I mean, you can't miss it if they have dusted it for fingerprints, can you? Well, I wasn't. All we did at that particular time was just walking through the crime scene. I wasn't watching what other people were doing. All right. Now, when you got out to the garage, to the window, you looked at that, didn't you? Yes, sir. Okay. Did you see any fingerprint polish powder on that? Not that I recall. Okay. So you are telling the jury that that had not been printed prior to. No, sir. I am not telling them that. You are just telling them, I'm just saying that I don't recall that. Well, and you didn't take any notes? No, sir. Okay. Did you notice how close the screen was to the actual window itself? The screen was attached to the window. Okay. Did you notice how close the screen was to the actual window pane? No, sir. Okay. Would it be fair to say that it was very close, less than an inch? I couldn't tell you. Okay. That just didn't seem important at the time? Well, I'm not saying it's not important, but I didn't sit there and take measurements on how far the distance between the screen and the window. Well, you could just eyeball it though, couldn't you? Well, I could have, but I didn't do it that way. All right, so you don't have any idea how far the window was from the screen. Well, I would say that it was pretty close. It's attached to the window. Okay. So that would limit it some, wouldn't it? Yes, sir. And if they were right together, don't you reckon that probably the screen or the window is close enough to the screen as possible, just far enough away so that the screen doesn't interfere with the window as the window was raised up and down? Yes, sir. Okay. The screen is on the outside and the window is on the inside, isn't it? The window is on the inside and the screen on the outside. Yes, sir. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yes, sir. Okay. And it makes sense that it's close. The purpose being that you want to leave room for the window to go up and down so that the screen doesn't interfere with it, but you want it as close as possible? Yes, sir. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yes, sir. That makes sense. Okay. And if it would work that way, you would probably have it probably that probably would have seemed unusual to you, and you probably would have remembered that if it wasn't which way? If it wasn't like we discussed, it probably would have looked unusual, and that would have attracted your attention. And you would have perhaps reserved that in the halls of your memory. I'm not sure what you are getting at. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just trying to figure out what you saw. You didn't take any notes, did you? No, sir. All right. At any rate, the court then says, I think we have established that the gentleman did not take any notes. Mr. Mulder says, well, Judge, I keep thinking that he may whip out that whip out book at any time. The court says, I see. Well, let's just move on to the next question. Mr. Mulder says, all right. And then continues. At any rate, did you look at the outside of the window? Yes, sir. Okay. And did you see some mulch out there? Out in the backyard? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. And did that appear to be disturbed or undisturbed? It didn't appear to be disturbed to me. Okay. How does it look when it's disturbed versus when it's undisturbed? What I'm going to have to go on is what James Cron, another person that was there, along with David Neighbors, told me about that. Okay. So you are telling me that you can't look at mulch yourself and determine whether it's been disturbed or undisturbed? I think from the time that I got out there and looked at that, that you are talking about the difference between several hours and, it may be a little bit different from what I saw. Well, I mean, mulch is mulch, isn't it? It is, but I think that you are going to have to. It's going to be different when it's somewhat from the time that the crime scene unit gets there and they start looking at this versus me looking at it several hours after that. Okay. It's fair to say that you didn't see anything unusual about it shortly after 8 o'clock or shortly after 9 o'clock or whatever time you got out there. I can't tell you that whether it was disturbed or not. Okay. There was nothing. Was there anything about it that attracted your attention to it? I can't tell you that Not to me, no. All right. Did you, in the light of day then, did you examine that gate? Yes, sir. And what did you observe about the gate? I didn't see that. Well, I have to go on what the crime scene officer tells me because that is part of his notes and that is part of what he is going to tell me. Well, I understand that, but I'm just talking about what you personally saw. Did you see anything unusual about it? I didn't see any blood on the gate. Okay, that would have been unusual. Yes, sir. Okay, you didn't see any blood. Anything else? No, sir. Would you have expected to see blood? If someone had been inside that house and went out that door, I would. Okay, and why is that? If someone had been in that, if an intruder had been in that house, they would have had to have some blood on them. And there wasn't any evidence in the garage of blood or going out the window of blood. Okay. You figured that the intruder had to have been injured? I wouldn't say he had been injured. Cut his hands, perhaps? No. Cut his leg? No. Cut his face? I don't know. Well, where would you expect the blood on the intruder to be? On his feet. Okay. Police officers walked throughout that house from the den area through the kitchen. You didn't see any tracks from the police officers, did you? No, sir. Okay. It's my understanding that they were careful enough that they didn't step in any blood. Okay. Would you expect to find blood on his hands? I don't know. Okay. Well, maybe yes and maybe no. I don't know. Okay. How long were you there at the scene? That morning? Yes, sir. I don't recall. And you didn't make any notes while you were there, however long you were there? I didn't take any handwritten notes. No. Okay. What time did you get off duty or what time did you finally leave? That day? Yes, sir. It was sometime late in the evening. I don't recall what time I left. Was it dark? I don't remember it being dark. It was sometime before dark? Yes, sir. When you left? Yes, sir. You don't recall going to Baylor Hospital the next day? Yes, sir. Okay. And about what time did you get there? Sometime late in the afternoon. Okay. Just give me your best guess. I don't know. Sometime late in the afternoon. All right. Before it got dark? I don't remember if it was dark or not. Okay. And can we assume that you continued your usual practice of not taking notes? Can we assume that you didn't take any notes? I didn't take any notes. No. All right. Did you go see Darlie Routier? Yes, sir. All right. And how long did you spend with her? 15 minutes. Okay. Did you visit with her? Just for a few minutes. Yes, sir. Okay. Did you ask her what had happened again out there? No, sir. Okay. Was Frosh with you? Yes, sir. Okay. Was anyone with her? There were several people there. Do you recall who was there? No, sir. Were they family members or medical personnel? Well, there was someone sitting at the front door or sitting in her room door. I believe it was a security officer, but I don't remember who was there. Okay, but you remember that people were there? There were other people there. Yes. Okay. And are you telling us that nothing of any import happened at that encounter? No, sir. You are not telling us that? We didn't talk about what had happened. No. Okay. Just how are you? How are you getting along? How was the food? Well, we checked on her well being. Yes. Okay. But nothing about the case? No. Okay. And you say that encounter took about 10 or 15 minutes? Yes, sir. Something like that? Yes, sir. Okay. And Frosh was with you? Yes, sir, he was. Did he take any notes? No, sir. Okay. You are sure about that? No, I'm not sure. You would have to ask Frosh about that. Okay. Well, I don't remember. I don't know. Okay. Well, first you said no. And then I said, are you sure about that? And then, well, I don't know if he took any notes or not. Okay. But you know you didn't? I know I did not. Okay. And you left after that? Yes, sir. When is the next time you saw Darlie Routier? June the 8th, 1996. That would be the next day? Yes, sir. Okay. Now, the 6th would be on a Thursday. Is that right? Yes, sir. The 7th was a Friday? Yes, sir. And the 8th would be a Saturday? Yes, sir. Okay. About what time did you see her? And where did you see her? At the police station. And I believe it was, I would have to look at my notes, but I believe it was after 4 o'clock. Okay. So the first time you saw her on the 8th, which is Saturday, is going to be at the police station? Yes, sir. Okay. And how did she come in there? Do you know? What do you mean, how did she come in there? How did she arrive? Was it by car? By two of our detectives. All right. Who had picked her up? Detective James Latham and Keith Needham. Okay. And where had they picked her up? Do you know? At Baylor Hospital. Okay. And then they brought her to the Rowlett Police Department? Yes, sir. Okay. And was that at your instruction? I had asked if they would come in and talk to us. Yes, Darlie and Darren Routier. Okay. And did they cooperate with you? Yes, sir, they did. All right. And did you visit with them? Yes, sir. Okay. And as best as you recall, they got there around 4 o'clock. Yes, sir. Again, no notes were made of this. I have a, I would know the exact time when I look at what I had read her. I read her the Miranda rights and it has the time on it. Okay. As a matter of fact, the Miranda rights, that is what you read someone before you take a statement from them frequently, isn't it? Yes, sir. Okay. And you read that to her? Yes, sir. And that basically says that you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to counsel. You can have a lawyer here. You can answer questions. You can refuse to answer questions. You can basically not cooperate with us if you don't want to. Basically, that is what it is. Well, that is kind of what it says, yes. Okay. But it starts out. It says you have a right to remain silent. It says anything you say can and may be used against you in a court of law, doesn't it? Well, I don't know if it starts off that way. I would have to read the one that I read to her. Okay. How long you been doing this? For 17 and a half years. Okay. All right. At any rate, did she give you a statement? She gave us a voluntary written statement. Yes, sir. Okay. And you asked her to, didn't you? I asked her if she wanted to, and she cooperated with you, didn't she? And she did, yes. How about Darren? Was he cooperative? Yes, sir. Okay. And by that I mean, did he go so far as to give you the keys to his house? No. Did he give you the keys to his business? I don't know about that. Did he give you the keys to his boat? I don't know about that. Well, I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean he may have? Well, does that mean he may have? Well, someone else was doing that, and I don't know if he did or didn't. Okay. I don't know if he let them in or if he gave the keys to them. Someone else went over there and done that. All right. Would you recognize her statement? Yes, sir. Let me show you what's been marked for identification and record purposes as Defendant's Exhibit number 76. And it appears to be a handwritten statement of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages. Is that her statement? Yes, sir. Okay. And you remember that statement being given to you? Yes, sir. Okay. And at this point, Mr. Mulder offers into evidence a defendant's exhibit number 76. Mr. Greg Davis says no objection. And then Mr. Mulder says, do y'all mind if I just, and the court says, excuse me, defendant's exhibit 76 is admitted. And then Mr. Mulder continues, do you all mind if I take this out or do you, Mr. Davis says, well, I tell you what, I have got the original. It's been marked as state's exhibit. The court says, can we substitute that? Mr. Mulder says, excuse me, Judge, this is defendant's exhibit number 76A. Mr. Davis says, yes, sir, that will be fine. It already has state's exhibit number 32 on it. But I'll tell you what, if you don't mind, let me just offer state's exhibit 32 as being the original of defendant's exhibit number 76. Mr. Mulder then says, well, inasmuch as this is my case and I am the one offering the evidence, if you don't mind, I'll just mark it myself. Mr. Davis says, whatever you like. The court says, gentlemen. Mr. Mulder says, well, Judge, I just want to make it clear who is offering the statement. The court says, gentlemen, we understand that you are offering the statement. Let's just get it numbered and marked and offered and let's move on. Mr. Mulder says, Judge, I'm pedaling as fast as I can. If you will, the court says, and we appreciate the effort. All right. This is going to be Defendant's Exhibit 76A. Is that correct, Mr. Mulder? Mr. Mulder says, yes, sir, that's correct. The court says, all right. No objection, I assume, Mr. Davis? Mr. Davis says, no objection. And the court says, all right, Defendant's Exhibit 76A is admitted. Mr. Mulder then says, is this an order? Mr. Davis says, yes, sir, it should be. And Mr. Mulder says, well, let me just put a staple in there. Is that agreeable with everybody? Mr. Davis says, yes, this is fine. Mr. Mulder says, Judge, I would like to read this if I may. And the court says, that will be fine. Mr. Mulder then says, okay, I'll read the whole thing. 6/8/96, 4:49 p.m. Darlie Lynn Routier, 5801 Eagle Drive, Rowlett, Texas, 75088. Time 4:49 p.m. Place 4401 Rowlett Road, Rowlett Police Department. Officer Detective J. Patterson, number 1004, City of Rowlett, Texas, County of Dallas, State of Texas. Quote, Police Officer Detective J. Patterson, the person to whom I make this written statement, has warned me, 1, that I have the right to have a lawyer present to advise me prior to and during any questioning. 2, if I am unable to employ a lawyer, I have the right to have a lawyer appointed to me to advise me prior to and during any questioning. 3, I have the right to remain silent and not make any statements at all, and that any statement that I make may be used in evidence against me at my trial. 4, I have the right to terminate the interview at any time. 5, any statement that I make may be used against me in court. I do not want to consult with a lawyer prior to and during the answering of any questions or the making of this statement. I fully understand and do hereby knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waive the above explained rights, and I do make this following voluntary statement to the aforementioned person of my own free will and without any promises or offers of leniency or favors, and through no fear, coercion, or threat of physical harm by any person whomsoever. Quote, I am 26 years of age, have completed 12 years of formal education, and can, is underlined, read, write, and understand the English language. You have can and cannot there, and I guess you underlined one. I asked her if she can, and she said she could. All right. Quote, Darren and my sister Dana came home from working at the shop. The boys were playing with the neighborhood kids outside. I was finishing up dinner. Damon came home and Devin called, and I told him to be home soon because we were going to eat. Darren played with the baby Drake with Dana a while, and I had pulled everything together to eat. Devin came home, and we all ate dinner together. After we ate, we cleaned all the plates. I was changing Drake while Darren put everything in some containers for leftovers. We all talked a little about how happy we were that the shop had been so busy for the past 3 weeks, and that we hoped it would continue since work had been slow for a couple of months. Devin and Damon asked if they could play with one of their friends a little while longer, and so we said okay. Darren, Dana, and I just sat around and watched a little TV. Later, and I'm not sure of the exact time, I asked Darren to drive Dana, my sister, home because I wasn't feeling well. While Darren was gone, the boys brought down their blankets and pillows and asked if they could watch TV. I said yes. They came downstairs and played on the floor in front of the TV with Drake while I made some popcorn. About 20 or 25 minutes later, Darren came in and sat down with us while we watched TV. Drake started to get fussy, so I made him a bottle, and I believe Darren fed him the bottle. Soon after, the boys both fell asleep. Darren took the baby upstairs and put him in his crib and came back downstairs. We talked a while about a few problems we were having with the car and the boat, and had a few words between us. Since I had the baby, I had been having some depression. I told Darren that I was depressed because I had not been able to take the boys anywhere because we only had one car. He told me that he loved me and asked me if I wanted him to sleep downstairs with me because I wanted to stay up a while and watch TV. I told him no, because I didn't think that he would be able to sleep on the couch and get any sleep. I had been sleeping on the couch the past week or so, off and on, because the baby slept in our room in the crib, and when he moved, he woke me up. Darren and I laid together for a little while and then decided to go to sleep because he had work the next day. This was around 12:30 or 1 o'clock. I'm not sure. He kissed me and said he loved me, and I told him I loved him and would see him in the morning. After a while, I started to get sleepy. The next thing, I woke up and felt a pressure on me. I felt Damon press on my right shoulder and heard him cry. This made me really come awake and realized there was a man standing down at my feet, walking away from me. I walked after him and heard glass breaking. I got halfway through the kitchen and turned back around to run and turn on the light. I ran back towards the utility room and realized that there was a big white-handled knife lying on the floor. It was then that I realized that I had blood all over me, and I grabbed the knife thinking he was in the garage. I looked over and saw the door shut to the garage, and so I thought he might still be in there, and I needed to get Darren. I ran back through the kitchen and realized that the entire living room area had blood all over everything. I put the knife on the counter and ran into the entrance, turned on the light, and started screaming for Darren. I think I screamed twice, and he ran out of the bedroom with his jeans on and no glasses and was yelling, "What is it? What is it?" I remember saying that he cut them. He tried to kill me, my neck. He ran down the stairs and into the room where the boys were. I grabbed the phone and called 911. Darren started giving Devin CPR while I put a towel on my neck and a towel on Damon's back. I remember telling Damon to hang on. Mommy was there. I looked over at Darren and saw the glass table had been knocked halfway off and the flower arrangement had been knocked over. I then stood up and turned around and saw glass all over the kitchen floor. I tried to glance over to see if anything was out of place or if anything was missing. I took a few steps and opened the door and screamed for Karen. I was still on the phone with 911. I don't recall what all was said because everything was happening so fast. I went back to Damon, and by him, he had stopped moving and the police walked through the door. The paramedics came and tried to work on the children. Darren was screaming, "Who did this? Who did this?" And I started asking if my babies were dead. Darren was crying and said yes. After that, I just remember screaming and showing Darren my neck. Darren took me out the front of the house, and by then, Darren ran upstairs to make sure the baby was okay. He showed me Drake was okay and then handed him to Karen, our neighbor. I remember them holding a towel on my neck and wiping my arm, and then he put me in the ambulance. Darren got in, but they told him he needed to leave so they could take me, so they could take care of me. I remembered to get to the hospital and then them telling me they were taking me to surgery. They took off my necklace and put me to sleep. I woke up and minutes later, the detectives were there asking me all kinds of questions. And she signed it, Darlie Routier. Yes. And that is her statement as you recall it? Her written statement, yes. Yes, sir. Now, in the course of that, Detective Patterson, you had asked her questions, had you not? You mean that there? Yes. While she was writing that? Yes, sir. No, sir. Okay. You had had your conversation with her ahead of time? Yes, sir. Okay. And do you recall in that conversation ahead of time that you had briefly gone through this entire statement? What do you mean? Well, do you remember whether or not you questioned her prior to the time that she sat down and write this out? No, I didn't do that. What did you do? Well, I mean, she wrote that out, and I didn't talk to her about it while she was writing. I didn't talk to her while she was writing that out. Had you talked to her before she wrote this out? Yes, okay. And how long did you talk to her before she wrote this statement out? Just a few minutes. Is that 10 or 15 minutes? I couldn't tell you. Okay. But at any rate, the time that she began writing this statement was 4:49. Or is that when you read I read the Miranda rights to her and then I talked to her. Okay. And again, you had told her, Detective Patterson, had you not, that you were following a bunch of leads in this case, hadn't you? Yes, sir. Okay. Now, had you made up your mind by that time that she was your prime suspect? No, sir. Okay. What leads were you following at that time, Detective Patterson? The leads, as far as what the crime scene was showing, what her first statement was that she, gave me. That written statement right there. Plus, we had two other detectives that were taking statements that people were calling in, which we call lead sheets. Lead sheets. What are lead sheets? Lead sheets is where someone will call in that they saw some kind of suspicious activity. Mm-hmm. That they remember something, and these other two detectives were following up with these sheets. Okay. Were they following up on this black car that had been seen out there in the vicinity? Well, yes, sir. And who was following up on the black car? Either James Latham or Keith Needham. Okay. Had you all received a call that a man who fit the description that you had given of the assailant had been spotted in the vicinity? No, sir. Okay. Do you recall a man by the name of Reggie Salter? Yes, sir. Well, he called in, didn't he? Yes, sir. Okay. And didn't he report seeing a man in a black baseball cap and in a black shirt and dark jeans the next morning? He called in the next morning. Yes, sir. Yeah, but that was on the other end of town. Oh, it was on the other end of town? Yes, sir. Well, how big is Rowlett? 22 or 23 square miles? Okay. How long does it take to drive from one end of town to the other end of town? Right now, with the traffic, a long time. All right. Without traffic, if you are doing it after midnight, you can do it in 4 or 5 minutes. Can't you? No, it would take you longer than that. Well, not much. Well, I can't tell you. I didn't time it. Well, you can drive from Interstate 30 to Highway 66 in 5 or 6 minutes, can't you? I don't know. Well, you can do it in less than 10, can't you? I don't know. You don't know about that either? No, sir. Okay. Now, Detective Patterson, in the course of your investigation, you found out that Darren had worked on the gate that evening, didn't you? The evening before? The day before? That evening before, the evening of the 5th of June? Well, I remember the day before, and I don't know if that puts it on the 4th or the 5th. Okay, but you did verify that he had, in fact, worked on the gate a short time before this happened, didn't you? How did we verify it? Well, you are all of the information, remember, is funneled through you. Yes, not through me, but through you. Well, I mean, well, you talked to the neighbor behind you, and the neighbor behind said they saw him working on it. Well, I didn't talk to the neighbor behind. I know it, but there is a report to that effect, isn't there? Well, I know that the gate looked like it had been worked on. Well, did somebody talk to the neighbor behind? No, not that I know of. I don't know. Okay, well, have you read your report? No, I don't remember seeing that report. Have you read your file? Have I? Yes, sir. When did you last read it? I just read bits and pieces of it just the last few weeks. I have not read the whole thing in several months. Okay. At one time, I assume you read it. I mean, that is the purpose of getting these reports, is to assimilate it all, isn't it? Yes, sir. Okay. I mean, you are the guy who is supposed to be, there is no way I can remember it all. Well, you don't have to remember it all, but you can. You are telling me you don't have anything in your file about that? No, sir. Okay. When you walked through the residence there, you got into the kitchen, didn't you, Detective Patterson? Yes, sir. Did you see the broken glass on the kitchen floor? Yes, sir. Okay. And was Officer Maine with you? No, sir. Did you talk to Officer Maine out at the scene? No, I talked to neighbors and James Cron. Okay. Were you careful not to step in any of the glass? I didn't step in any of the glass. Okay. Did you check your shoes after you got back out of the house to see if there was glass at the soles of your shoes? What I did is that I didn't go through the part where the glass was laying. Okay. So you didn't come up on the wine rack then, did you? I saw the wine rack, but you didn't get close enough to inspect it? I could see it from where I was. How far were you from the wine rack? A few feet. Okay, but not close enough to step on any glass? No, sir. Okay. When you got out of the house, did you look at the bottoms of your shoes? No, sir, I did not. You didn't? No, sir. It might have been a good practice to see if you had, in fact, stepped in any glass. I didn't step in any glass. Well, how do you know until you look at the bottom? I didn't step anywhere around where the glass was on that linoleum floor. Well, I know that, detective, but did it ever cross your mind that maybe somebody else had tracked glass in, and in stepping on the carpet, you would have stepped on that glass and tracked it around? Well, I didn't check my soles, but I didn't step in any glass. You have seen police officers at the scene of an offense before, haven't you? Yes, sir. Everybody wants to touch the gun, don't they? No, they don't. They don't want to touch the weapons? No, sir. They all stand back, and in fact, it's probably not even necessary to put people at the door and put tape around to keep the officers out, is it? Well, with our department, we don't have to worry too much about those officers doing that because they are pretty well trained and they know exactly what to do. The tape is to keep, bystanders out. Okay. It's to keep other people out. Okay. Did you determine that there was, in fact, a security light out in the backyard? I was told there was. Well, did you ever go out there? I saw the security light. Okay. So you were not only told it, but you saw it? Yes. Okay. And did you know where you had to go in the backyard to activate that light? No. Well, I mean, a light just comes on when you go in the backyard. I didn't check that. David Neighbors checked that. Okay. And did he conducted some experiments out there, didn't he? I believe he did, but you will have to ask him. I don't know. I wasn't there. Well, he filled out a report, didn't he? Yes, sir. Did you read the report? No, sir. Well, now, wait a minute now. You are the chief detective, and his report says that the light stays on for somewhere around 18 minutes. Is that all it says? Well, there's more pages to it than that. Okay, well, did you read his report or not? Yes, sir, I did. Okay, well, you told the jury that you didn't? Well, I know, but I did. You did? Yes, sir. Okay, well, I mean, any reason you would tell them that you didn't read it? No, it was just my mistake for saying that I didn't. Okay. As a matter of fact, in the report, he says that Mr. Davison says, I'm going to object to that as being hearsay. The court says sustained. And Mr. Davis says he can ask David Neighbors about it. The court says sustained. Mr. Mulder then continues. David Neighbors is here, is he? Yes, sir. Okay. And you know from your investigation that you can walk from that window to the gate on the paved exposed aggregate there and not activate the light. You know that, don't you? No, I do not know that. Okay. Let me ask you, while they are looking for Mr. Neighbor's report, let me ask you this. There was a viewing of the body. Is that right? Of the youngster's body? Yes, sir. Okay. And after that, there was a funeral the next day? Yes, sir. Did you attend the funeral? Yes, sir. Okay. And then I believe on the 14th, there was a prayer service at the gravesite. Were you aware of that? Yes, sir. Okay. And did you attend that? No, sir. Did you place a microphone by the graveside for the prayer service so that you could record and intercept things that were said at the gravesite? I did not. Who did? Two other detectives. Why did they do that? In case someone went out there and made a confession about what happened. Did you realize that was that done with your knowledge? Yes, sir. Did you know that that is a violation of federal law? That is a federal felony? Mr. Davis says, I'm going to object to that. That calls for some legal conclusion. The court says, I will sustain the objection. Mr. Mulder says, okay. Mr. Mulder continues to question. But you are telling this jury that you folks put microphones at the gravesite to monitor the conversations of the people who had gone there to pray and to mourn and to grieve at the passing of these two children? Yes, sir. And recorded all that? Yes, sir. And these were hidden. so that the people couldn't find them. I mean, it was designed to be done surreptitiously, was it not? So that they didn't see it. That's right. And you would record these private moments. Is that right? Yes, we did. Who all knew about this besides you? Detective Frosch. And who else? The two detectives that set it up. Okay, but you were a part of it. It was done not only with your knowledge, but at your insistence, wasn't it? I didn't insist on anyone to do it, but y'all got together and thought it would be a good idea? Yes, sir. Okay. Let me hand you what has been marked for identification and record purposes as Defendant's Exhibit number 77. I'll ask you if that is Sergeant Neighbor's report. Yes, sir, it is. Does that refresh your memory? Well, did the district attorney's office know that you had surreptitiously planted microphones at the gravesite to monitor those private conversations? Could you tell me what that word means? Surreptitiously? Yes, sir. Secretly. No, I don't remember. I don't think the DA's office knew about that. You didn't tell them? Do you know if that is a violation of state law as well? Not that I remember. Okay. Have you reviewed that report? I didn't review the whole page, just what is highlighted. Okay. Do you recognize that as having seen it before? Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Okay. You know, based on your investigation, that you could pass on the paved area from the window to the gate and not trip or set off the security lights, don't you? Yes, sir. It says that you can walk on the paved part from the gate to the window without triggering the light. Okay. And you didn't have to take anybody's word for it. I mean, you know from experiments that were performed out there. Weren't there, to your knowledge? Yes, sir. Okay. Did you, in the course of your investigation, determine how many fingerprints were lifted out there at that residence? I don't remember any fingerprints being lifted. Okay. What I remember is the palm print. Okay. Finger or palm prints? Yes, sir. How many lifts were taken? Do you know? I don't recall. I don't know. Okay. That just didn't seem important to you? Well, that's important to me, but that is also someone else's, I have to delegate, some of this to other people because I can't, do it all. And I don't remember how many were taken. Okay. Or lifted. Okay. After Darlie had written this statement for you, did you continue to talk to her? No, sir. Okay. How long did it take her to write this statement? I don't remember. Well, I mean, can we agree that it didn't take more than probably a half an hour? Well, no, I don't remember. Well, can we agree that it didn't take more than an hour? I don't remember. Okay. It took her longer than 30 minutes. Okay. Did it take her more than an hour? I don't remember. Okay. But you are saying that you were just sitting there and you were not asking any questions? I was not sitting there the whole time. Oh, you just left her there in the room? I left her in the room during part of it, and I check on her to see if she was completed with it or not. Okay. When she finished it, did y'all talk further? No, sir. What did you do? I just read it over, and I asked her if this was everything, and she said yes. Okay. Did you read it over out loud? No, sir. You read it over to yourself? Yes, sir. Okay. Did you have any further discussion with her about what happened out there that evening? On the 8th? Yes. No. Okay. Are you sure about that? I don't recall talking to her any more about it. No. Okay. Have you testified on another occasion under oath that we may have discussed whether or not she struggled with the man? Well, I don't recall that. I have testified on other occasions about this, but I don't remember saying that. Would it refresh your memory to see that? Yes, sir. And then you might remember that perhaps that was discussed, or you didn't know whether that was discussed or not? Well, I don't remember at this point if it was discussed. Okay. Are you saying that it may well have been discussed? I'm saying that I don't remember it. Okay. And at this point in the transcript, the jury actually heads to lunch, and then everybody goes and they come back, and it is The testimony is then started up yet again. Officer Patterson, I'm going to get into where we left off in just a minute, but just so that you and I are on the same wavelength, do you understand what the federal law is as regards to monitoring private phone conversations? No, sir. Weren't you a narcotics officer? Didn't you work drugs? Yes, sir. Well, in that capacity, didn't you have occasion to get wiretaps? Well, if you're saying that I violated some law, then I'm not going to say anything else about that. Well, you're going to answer my questions. The court says, well, Mr. Mulder says, are you going to take the fifth? Is that what you are going to say? If you're saying that I violated some state or federal law, then I'm not going to answer it until I have legal counsel. Well, I suspect you better get legal counsel then, because I am suggesting to you that that is exactly what you did. Mr. Davis says, object to him suggesting anything the officer has already stated that he doesn't know. The court says sustained. Mr. Mulder says, Judge, it doesn't make any difference to me whether you warn the man or not. The court knows the law, and it's a violation of state and federal law. The court says, Mr. Mulder, I know the law. And Mr. Mulder says, this is a federal felony. The court says, Mr. Mulder, please, please. Officer Patterson is a law enforcement officer and is presumed to know the law in Texas. Yes, sir. I have advised him of his rights in this regard. And you do have a right, under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, not to say anything that might tend to incriminate you in any way. And you certainly understand all of that, do you not? The witness says, yes, sir. The court says, so you are an experienced law enforcement officer. You have warned a lot of other people of their rights. You know what the Miranda warnings are, do you not? I do. Well then, if you know what the Miranda warnings are, then I think that that speaks for itself. You understand what you can do and what you can't do. Do you need any further counseling, do you think? Any explanation of what your rights are under the law? And the witness says, no, sir. And the court says, okay, fine. I think we have covered that. So ask your questions. If he wants to answer it, he will. If he does not, then he can invoke the Fifth Amendment. Mr. Mulder says, yes, sir. Let me just ask you something. And at this point, he's actually speaking to the witness. Do you understand any more about it now than you did before the judge talked to you about what the law is? No one has read me any statute that I violated a law. Okay. Would you like to have time to read both the state laws and the federal laws as regards to the surreptitious collection of conversation, such as you and those other officers that you told us about before lunch recorded? I would like to read it. Yes. The court says, well, then in that case, do you have another witness that you can put on the stand? Mr. Mulder says, would the court let me go on to some other matters and then let him read that the court says, proceed. Let's just don't get into that area. Go into something else. Mr. Mulder says, yes, sir, and then continues his questioning. In all fairness to you, don't you think that it is appropriate that anything I ask you about or any remarks that you make be recorded? Do I think it's fair? Yeah. Fair to you? Well, I don't understand what you are saying. Well, don't you think that I'm not going to ask you to make any comments about that until you have had time to get legal counsel and to talk with your lawyer about the state law and the federal law. But don't you think that in fairness to you, if I questioned you about that our conversations ought to be recorded? Well, at this time, until I have legal counsel or until I read that, if I violated something, then I'm not going to answer you. Well, I guess I'm missing the point. But in fairness to you, so that your jury, if it comes to that on down the line, will know exactly what you said and what admissions you made or didn't make, don't you think in fairness to the prospective defendant that those conversations should be recorded so that there is no question about what was said? I don't understand what you are saying. Well, all right, let me put it another way, and maybe I can make this a little more artful. I guess the bottom line is this. If I am going to question you about criminal conduct, don't you think, in fairness to the person questioned, and then I tell you that I'm going to use that, whatever you say on down the line against you, or I could have, it has that possibility. Don't you think, in fairness to the person questioned, that your answers ought to be recorded so that there is no question about what you said or didn't say? I still don't understand what you are saying. All right, let me run it from another direction. Suppose you were going to question me about a traffic violation for speeding from here to San Antonio or something. Well, let's make it something more serious than that. But you are going to question me. Do you think, in fairness to me, whatever I say should be recorded so that on down the line, a week from now, or 2 weeks from now, or a month from now, if you intend to use that against me, that there would be an accurate rendition of what I have said so that we don't have to rely on your memory? Well, until I get legal counsel about what you are saying, I'm not going to answer you. Okay. You don't even have the answer, do you? But you were a narcotics officer, weren't you? Yes, sir. And in that capacity, did you record conversations? I did. Okay. You ought to be familiar with the law. Well, Mr. Greg Davis then says, I'm sorry, excuse me. I thought we were done with this until we had a break. The court says, Mr. Mulder, let's move on to some other area other than what this is. Mr. Mulder says, yes, sir. The court says, and then we can get back on this after we take a break. Mr. Mulder says, yes, sir, I understand. He then continues, I had asked you if you questioned her prior to the time that she made this written statement. Do you recall that? Yes, sir. And what was your answer, Mr. Patterson? That we talked a few minutes. And what did you talk about, Mr. Patterson? I don't recall. Do you recall when you testified under oath on August the 26th and 27th of 1996? Do you recall that? I remember testifying, but I don't remember the dates. Do you remember being under oath at that time? Yes, sir. You swore to tell the truth? Yes, sir. Do you recall being asked, quote, did you ask her questions as she was writing, or did she just write it out in longhand? Do you recall answering, quote, well, we had talked a little bit right before, prior to that, and then she wrote it out, unquote. Quote, what did you all talk about? Unquote. Quote, the same thing. I just asked her what happened, unquote. Is that right? Can I look at that? You bet. Okay. Do you recall being asked those questions and making those answers? Yes, sir. Okay. So you did talk with her about what had happened before she wrote it out in longhand? Just a few minutes. Yes, sir. And at that time, you asked her to write it out in longhand then, after you had quizzed her about it? I asked her if she would. Yes, sir. Again, nothing recorded, no notes by Patterson. No, sir. All right. And I asked you if in that conversation she had told you that she had struggled with a man. Is that right? That, do what now? Did she tell you in this conversation that you had, before she wrote her statement out, that she had struggled with the man? She had told me that on the 6th. Did she tell you that on the 8th? I don't remember her telling me that on the 8th. You aren't saying that she didn't tell you that, are you? I don't recall her telling me that on the 8th. All right, well, that doesn't. Do you recall being asked this question? Quote, Detective Patterson, the first time you spoke with her, she told you about a struggle on June the 8th. Did she say anything to you about a struggle occurring between her and the intruder? Unquote. Answer, quote, not in the report, she doesn't, unquote. And by that, you meant not in her handwritten version, I take it? Okay. She didn't write a report, but I take it that you are talking about what she wrote down? Is that right? Right? Okay. Quote, did she, in that conversation with you on June the 8th, did she, in conversations with you on June 8th? Unquote. Quote, I honestly don't remember if she did or not. Unquote. Is that what you said? Can I read that? You bet. Okay. Did you make that answer under oath? Well, it says that I did. Yes, sir. Well, I mean, do you have any recollection or not? Well, it says that I said that. Well, that is not what I asked you. Does that refresh your memory, or are you still telling the jury that you don't know one way or the other? Well, I mean, that is the statement that I made on June the 8th. Well, you now remember that? Well, after reading it, yes. Okay. All right. Are you telling this jury now that you don't know whether she discussed that with you or not? Well, that says that I don't remember if she said anything about a struggle, but in her written statement, she didn't say that she struggled with him. All right. That was going to be my next question. After you read her statement, did you discuss it with her? No, sir. You didn't discuss it with her? No, sir. Why is that? Well, I didn't feel that I needed to. Why not? I just didn't. Well, apparently, you said in the conversation on the 6th that y'all didn't write anything down about it. Well, I didn't say that we didn't. No, I say that you didn't. I say you didn't. I didn't write anything. Well, do you see anything in Frosch's notes here that he had at the hospital? Well, I read Frosch's supplement report. You read a report that you all did sometime later? Yes, not the notes that he took there in the hospital? Right, that is nothing uncommon, you know that. Well, you don't know what I know? Well, but that is nothing uncommon. No, I suggest to you that it is uncommon. And I suggest to you that, in fairness, if you are going to hold her feet to the fire for something that you claim she said, that you would have at least have the honesty to record it. Or Mr. Davis says, I object to this as being argumentative. It's not even a question. The court says, all right, gentlemen, if you will please direct questions to the witness, if the witness will answer to the point, briefly and succinctly and straight to the question asked. Thank you. Mr. Mulder then continues. Don't you think, Mr. Patterson, that in all fairness, that if you are going to hold somebody accountable for a statement that you claim that they made, that you would at least record the statement accurately? Is that too much to ask? I did. You didn't record it at all. You wrote nothing down, and he wrote a sentence or two. Mr. Davis says, well, I'm going to object to what those notes may or may not say. Detective Frosch is back there if he wants to question him on those. This officer didn't make those notes. The court says, all right, gentlemen, if you will just ask the question, if that is a document of a prior hearing in which this witness testified to, let's get straight to the point. Officer Frosch is present. We can call him later. He is back there, Mr. Davis? Mr. Davis says, yes, sir, he is. And the court says, all right. Mr. Mulder says, Mr. Patterson, when you went through the residence with the other detectives on the walkthrough on June 6th, did you see some towels with blood on them in the den area? The towels I remember were in the hall. Towels in the hall. All right. How many towels did you see in the hall? I didn't count them. Were they bloody? There were some washcloths that had some blood on them or had something that appeared to be like blood. Were they wet when you saw them? I don't recall if they were or not. Were you told that they had been wet? No, sir. Did you inquire as to whether or not they were wet? No, sir. It didn't make any difference. It made a difference. She told you she put wet towels on the boys, didn't she? In her written statement. Did she ever tell you that she put wet towels on the boys? Well, in her written statement, she did. All right. Mr. Mulder at this point says, Judge, might I suggest that I am at the point that I would like to go back into that, but I have another witness that I could put on, and if we could get him counsel. And the court says, that is fine. If you will step down, please. All right, so let's do what we always do and do a recap of what we have heard in this episode. So first, we find out after Patterson had left the hospital after visiting Darlie, he went back to the Routier home. And there he met up with Sergeant David Neighbors, who was in charge of the crime scene. And he also met up with James Cron, whom we have already heard from earlier in this trial. He was then walked through the crime scene. And at that point, he understood that photographs had already been taken. He wasn't sure about if any fingerprints had been taken yet or not. We do learn that Patterson, at the time that he's testifying in 1996, he has been an officer for 17 and a half years and a detective for 8 years. He's asked about the window screen in the backyard. and was asked about how far the window screen was from the glass pane on the window. And he said he didn't recall. But Mulder's point, the defense attorney's point, is that the difference between the distance of the screen and the window, what he wants to kind of make Patterson aware of is that, well, it really wasn't even unusual enough to draw his attention. It was just simply the window and the screen. And I'm sure this is going somewhere. Patterson also said that it didn't appear to him as if the mulch around the, in the outside backyard had been disturbed, but, others, mainly Cron, had said that it had. So he believed that it had. When it comes to the gate in the backyard, Patterson kind of defers this by saying that this is part of the crime scene unit's job, but that he personally didn't see any blood on the gates and he would have expected to see that. I guess that would kind of depend on if the gate was open or shut or how the intruder chose to leave through the gates, wouldn't it? The thing is, though, that Patterson said that he would have expected to see bloody shoe prints. But when he's asked if, hey, other officers have been in the house and they've done all this, were there any bloody shoe prints in the house? Patterson said he didn't see any. And again, he is asked if he took any notes while he was there, meaning handwritten notes. And if you recall, this was a really big issue in part 1. And he said that he did not. Now, the following day, so he goes sees Darlie. He goes back to the house, and then the next day he goes back to Baylor Hospital to see Darlie. But he can't recall when he did this, other than it was late afternoon. He is again asked if he took any handwritten notes, and he did not. When he was there, he did say that Officer Frosch was there, as well as a security officer outside of Darlie's hospital room door. So, remember, by this time, Cron would have already walked through the home, and within, doing this in 20 to 30 minutes, Cron would determine that this was an inside job. Now, the focus then turned to Darlie. So it's likely that at this point, and again, I'm just assuming here, but it's likely at this point that they had already targeted her as the suspect. And from here on out, she is the main target of the investigation, which is why I'm assuming there was an officer sitting outside of her hospital room door. Now, at the hospital, he says that they spoke to Darlie for about 15 minutes, but they didn't talk about the crime. But no one took notes. So it's kind of curious that they would have spoken to her for this long about everything else but the crime. And we'll never know, at least not yet, about what they did talk about, because they didn't take any notes, as far as we know. The next time that he saw Darlie was actually at the police station. And this was after she was released from the hospital. And then both her and Darren were taken to the police station by 2 detectives straight from the hospital. But the thing is, both Darren and Darlie they agreed to come into the station, and they got there around 4 o'clock. We learned that this time, when Darlie arrives voluntarily at the police station, this is when Patterson then decides to read her Miranda rights. She was asked to give a voluntary written statement, and she agreed to do so. And Darren did so as well. We then hear in this episode Darlie's statement as it was given on June 8th of 1996 at 4:49 p.m. So they get there at around 4 o'clock for 49 minutes. I'm not sure what they're doing, but at 4:49, she's starting her statement. Now, in this statement, the one thing that I've always wondered, and I swear I mentioned this way at the beginning, in her statement, when she's talking about her and Darren, and this is after the dinner and just before Darren goes to bed, she says, quote, "We had some words," meaning between her and Darren. It's very vague, and it doesn't go into a lot of detail, and I've always been really interested about what she meant by that, and we may learn about this later. Additionally, at one point, she asked Darren, so this is after the crime, and this is still in her statement. So she's woken up, she's noticed the children, she's chased the guy, and hollers for Darren to come downstairs. And Darren comes downstairs and he starts working on one of the children. And at one point, she turns and asks Darren if her babies were dead. And he says yes. But this was before the paramedics arrived, I believe. And this is, at this point, we know before the paramedics were even there that Damon is still alive. She then said there's a big gap in there, because obviously the paramedics have to come in, and the reason I say that there's a gap is because she said that Darren then took her outside, and it was first of all at this time, according to Darlie, that Karen came and took Drake, the baby, and that Darren went to go get into the ambulance with her. So at some point, when I talk about a gap, I mean when the paramedics showed up, what they did, there was a gap between this time frame when she's in the house on 911 and then all of a sudden getting into the ambulance. Patterson is also asked if he spoke to Darlie before she wrote out her statement. And he said that he did for a few minutes, but he couldn't remember how long. So before Darlie, Patterson also said that before Darlie had sat down to voluntarily give this written statement, he had told her that they were following up on a bunch of leads. We also discover that someone had called in a tip the following morning about seeing a man in a black baseball cap, a dark t-shirt, and dark jeans the same night that this crime occurred. But this guy who called it in was on the other side of town, which evidently the police didn't take seriously because he was on the other side of town. I don't quite get that. When Patterson is then questioned, well, how long would it take to get across town especially after midnight in Rowlett? And he consistently says he does not know. So did they check this out? Or, had they already just targeted a suspect and just didn't feel it was necessary? We learn that Darren had evidently worked on the gate in the backyard the night before the crimes. And the reason this came up was that there was a neighbor that was interviewed by one of the officers. It was not Patterson. And a neighbor had said that Darren had been outside working on the gate. But, Patterson could not remember any police report where this came up. When it comes to the backyard and that security light out there, evidently, Sergeant Neighbors ran some tests on this light and discovered that the light actually stays on for about 18 minutes. But if you stayed on the paved part of the backyard, the light did not go off. We find out that Patterson did in fact attend the funeral, and he was aware of the prayer service at the gravesite on the 14th. He did not attend that service. However, he's asked if he placed a microphone at the gravesite to record things that were said there. But then he said it wasn't him, it was two other detectives. He does, however, say that it was done with his knowledge. Now, when Mulder brings up the fact that this is a federal felony, Davis, the prosecutor, he objects, and it's sustained by the judge. Patterson does say that Frosch also knew about it, as well as the two other detectives that had set it up. And there's going to be more to this as we continue. So he's also asked if he noticed, if fingerprint dust was in the house when he did his walkthrough, or how many fingerprints had been taken at the crime scene. He said he didn't know. And I keep, for a guy who's supposed to be in charge of an investigation, he sure doesn't seem to know a whole lot. Or he does, and he's just acting as if he doesn't know. But when all is said and done, he just really comes off as a guy who is just not very well prepared for this testimony. And the thing is that we find out that Patterson, he's worked in narcotics before as an officer and is likely familiar with wiretaps and what can and cannot be done. He then does not answer. And, when he's asked, hey, did you know if this was legal or not? He doesn't answer. And Mulder then points out that Patterson, look, you likely violated both state and federal law, and suggests that he get an attorney of his own. The judge then steps in, and the judge then makes absolutely sure that Patterson understands the law and gives him the option to invoke his Fifth Amendment if he wants to. Clearly, the judge clearly understanding that this is a very big issue. Now, Patterson, he claims to know the law, but now he's wanting to read the state and federal laws regarding recording private conversations secretly. So, what they decide to do is move on to another line of questioning until Patterson can review these laws during a break. He's then asked some more questions and said that, yes, he did talk with Darlie about what had happened before she made her written statement, but he had to be provided with his actual testimony that he had done in August of 1996 to kind of jog his memory about this. And again, during this time, he took no notes in this conversation with Darlie. When it comes to what notes that Frosch had taken in the hospital while they were questioning or talking with Darlie, Patterson said that, hey, he didn't read those notes. He only read Frosch's supplemental report, which was written later and evidently only about a couple of pages long. The final thing that they get into before he is allowed to come down off of the stand were the towels that were in the home. And he did say that he saw some in the hallway, but he didn't know how many. He didn't know if they were wet. He didn't know if they had blood on them or anything. And at this point, Mulder wants to get into the questioning about the recording at the gravesite. But before he can do that, Patterson needs to go over the state and federal laws, very likely with an attorney. But even though he's allowed to get down from the stand, he will be recalled after a few witnesses. So with that, we'll end the first portion of Detective Patterson's testimony. Now, the next three witnesses are Mary Rickles. She is someone who lived about a half a mile from the Routiers and reported someone trying to gain access to her home, as well as a strange black car. Then we'll hear from Cyrilda Routier. This is Darren's mother. And then we'll hear from Darren Routier, Darlie's husband, obviously, before we get back into the questioning of Detective Patterson. So thank you all so much. If you like this content and you keep finding yourself coming back for each episode, please click the thumbs up button on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen so that you're always in the loop as to the next episode. We will talk very, very soon. Bye for now.